Have you ever laid in the dark and realized that silence isn't empty at all? There's no traffic, no glow outside the window, just a space wide, deep, quietly listening to your breathing. On the brutal winter nights of the Wild West, silence wasn't a sign of peace. It was a question, an old question, a cold one. Will you make it through tonight? In the modern world, when you close your eyes, that's when everything is allowed to pause. But for people living out in wind and snow, sleep was never simply rest. It was a risky surrender, one moment where the body had to decide, stay awake to survive or sink into sleep to recover. If you're listening to this story at night, you can lower the light around you, let your shoulders soften, and allow your breath to slow down. And if you feel yourself curious about that ancient question, gently tap like, share, and subscribe so we can keep moving very slowly together through the cold nights of history where sleep was never something you could take for granted. Imagine lying down not on a soft bed but on a layer of dry, straw-thin damp carrying the scent of old wood and cold earth. There's no light switch to flip back on when you feel uneasy, no digital clock counting down the hours. Only darkness and the slow wind slipping through invisible cracks. In your world today, sleep is a right, something guaranteed. But in the 19th century Wild West, sleeping was an act of survival. Sleep too deeply and you might never wake up. Sleep too lightly and your body breaks down, your mind frays, and you won't have the strength for tomorrow. So people back then didn't simply go to sleep. They entered heat preservation mode. They lay down not to dream but to keep their bodies warm until morning. You can pull the blanket up to your chin, turn until you find a comfortable position and let your thoughts drift away. But they couldn't. They slept in their daytime clothes, slept with their boots set right beside them, slept with their bodies curled, tight arms pressed to the chest, head tucked low to hold on to warmth. No one dared to fully let go, because letting go sometimes meant giving up. Out there, sleep wasn't rest. Sleep was the only way not to freeze to death. Winter nights didn't pass quickly. They stretched on, slow and heavy. There was nothing to mark time but the wind, nothing to separate 1 hour from the next, except the cold creeping into every fingertip. People learned to lie still, not to relax, but because movement meant losing heat. They listened to the night, the crack of wood, snow sliding softly across the roof. A distant sound, some creature moving through the dark. And in the middle of all those sounds they held on to something more precious than fire, steady breathing. If you're listening to this story in the warmth of your own room, you can let your eyes grow heavy. No need to understand, no need to remember. Just let those old images pass through your mind, like a small flame dancing in the dark. Because tonight we won't talk about battles. We won't talk about heroes. We're going to talk about one night, one roof, and one deeply human question. How do you sleep when sleep itself is a risk? And to truly understand that question, you'll need to place yourself right where it was born, in a wide, empty land. Far from civilization, standing before a lone cabin in a world of white snow. Take your steps a little slower, because in the next part you won't just hear about their sleep. You'll become one of them, standing face to face with the winter night of the Wild West. You are no longer just listening, You are standing there, not inside a clear memory, but inside something very real, where your boots press against frozen ground and the breath you exhale instantly dissolves into a thin cloud of smoke. This is the land west of Wyoming or Montana. No one remembers the exact boundary anymore because winter has erased all familiar markers. In front of you, the land opens so wide it makes a person feel smaller. There are no fences, no clear roads, only snow stretching outwards, silent mounds of earth, and a low, heavy sky pressing down on everything. The wind doesn't howl. It blows steadily, slowly, patiently, as if it already knows you have nowhere else to go. You stand still for a moment, not to take in the view, but because your body needs time to accept the cold seeping through fabric, through skin, into every joint. Far off in the distance, the only light in the entire land is a weak yellow glow. A small wooden cabin, low rough, nearly blending into the colour of earth and snow. You don't call it home. You call it the chance to make it through the night. Each step you take toward the cabin produces a faint creak beneath your feet. The snow isn't soft. It has been packed down by days of deep cold. The ground feels locked in place, as if winter has sealed everything shut. One thing becomes very clear: no one is waiting for you. There's no voice behind the door, no sign of comfort, just you and a simple wooden structure built not to last but to endure. When you place your hand on the cabin door, the numbness comes instantly. The wood is cold, dry, rough. There's no polished metal handle, just a worn wooden bar touched countless times by people before you, people who wanted exactly what you want right now, to make it through the night. Behind you there is no town, no church, no inn, no oil lamps glowing in distant windows. Civilization is far away, so far that it no longer exists as an option in your thoughts. Out here no one thinks about the distant future. No one plans far ahead. Everything collapses into a single narrow span of time. Tonight. You step inside the cabin. The space closes in immediately, not in a comforting way, but in the way a temporary shelter does. The smell of old wood, smoke soaked into the walls, the damp scent of dry straw. All of it blends into something unpleasant, yet familiar to anyone who has ever been here. The light inside is dimmer than you expect. A small fire has been lit already, or perhaps only embers remain from whoever was here before you. You don't stand upright for long. The ceiling is low. The space is tight. Your body adjusts on its own shoulders, drawing in posture, lowering as if you're already used to taking up less room. In that moment, something important becomes clear. You've left the wide world outside and entered a space where everything revolves around holding on to warmth, not comfort, not emotion, just body heat. You don't remove your boots right away. You don't hang your coat neatly. There's no ritual of coming home. Every movement is restrained, slow, minimal, just enough. Because you know the night here is not for relaxation. It's an empty stretch that must be filled with just enough alertness and just enough surrender. Outside, the wind continues to move across the open land. It doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care how far you've come. The only thing that matters now is whether you can lie down and wake up in the morning. You stand still a little longer inside the cabin, listening as the space settles. The fire crackles softly. The wood gives a faint sound as it contracts in the cold. In this place you are no longer the storyteller. You are no longer the listener. You are a human being preparing for the most important act of the night, lying down the right way. And from that moment on, as your body begins to search for a position to rest, the story will no longer be about space. It will move to something far more intimate, how people of the Wild West truly slept inside cabins like this. When the cabin door closes behind you, the vast world outside disappears. Not suddenly, but as if it's pushed back very slowly. Behind rough-cut logs, beams bent by years of strain and gaps so narrow that even daylight hesitates before slipping through. This cabin isn't a room designed for living. It's a structure built for one purpose only, to resist winter. The walls aren't smooth. Logs are stacked according to what human hands could manage, not according to any finished blueprint. Between them are packed earth and straw, dried mud and tiny cracks the wind always finds first. The roof is low, not high enough to feel spacious, but low enough to trap heat. Snow presses down from the outside, and when the wind shifts, you can hear a faint hiss like winter's breath searching for a way in. There are no separate bedrooms, no divided kitchen, no place to retreat. Everything exists inside one single room. You eat here, you sit here, and when night comes, you sleep here. The bed isn't really a bed. It's a low wooden frame set tight against the wall to avoid direct drafts. On top lies a layer of dry straw compacted by countless nights. The straw no longer smells fresh. It carries dampness, earth, and the scent of bodies that once lay here with the same hope. Over it rests a wool blanket, not thick, not soft, but enough to form a fragile boundary between human skin and cold air. Wool is never completely dry. No matter how many times it's aired out, it holds a trace of moisture, and that moisture slows the cold while making it linger. You don't lie down immediately. Your body needs a few moments to adjust to the temperature inside the cabin. It's not much warmer than outside, only different in that the wind isn't striking your face. In one corner there's a small window, not glass but oiled paper stretched across a wooden frame. Daylight passes through it dim and yellow like a distant memory. At night it becomes a deep black patch. Sometimes you see shadows of drifting snow. Sometimes it's just the sense that many things outside are still moving. You lie down without undressing, without changing clothes. Every layer you're wearing is part of the heat retention strategy. Your back meets the straw rough but familiar. Your body automatically adjusts, curling slightly to reduce exposure to air. When you exhale, your breath doesn't vanish at once. It lingers before you as a thin mist, then slowly fades. Inside the cabin, the temperature is still low enough for breath to freeze for a moment. This is where sleep begins, not in the mind, but in the body. Each breath is slowed not to relax but to conserve energy. Every movement is considered. Turning too much can break the pocket of warm air gathered around you. You learn to stay still, not from discipline, but from instinct. The fire has burned down. No one keeps a strong flame through the night unless absolutely necessary. Firewood is precious, and a bright fire can be more dangerous than the cold. Only embers remain enough to keep the cabin from total darkness enough to reveal the grain of the wooden ceiling when your eyes open in the night. There is no clock, no concept of midnight. Time is measured by how the cold shifts across your body. Your hands rest close to your chest, not for comfort, but because that's where warmth must be protected most. Here, sleep is not complete surrender. It's a suspended state between waking and drifting, between listening and forgetting. People of the Wild West didn't fall into deep sleep the way we do today. They slept in layers, in waves, always leaving a part of their awareness tuned to the cabin, tuned to the night. And within that listening, the body slowly adapts. Breathing evens out. The heart slows not because of perfect safety, but because there is no other choice. Settle asleep is not beautiful, not quiet, not whole, but it is enough. Enough to keep the body from giving up. Enough that when faint light slips through the oiled paper window in the morning, you can open your eyes and continue. And in nights repeating like this, when cabin straw, blankets and breath become a familiar rhythm, you begin to feel that winter doesn't come just once. It stretches on, it returns, and it forces human life into an entirely different rhythm, a winter rhythm that will reveal itself more clearly as one day drifts into the next. After a few nights like this, you begin to realize that the hardest part of winter isn't the first wave of cold. It's the repetition. Morning arrives very slowly. There is no clear moment you can call dawn-only darkness thinning out, then a dull grey light seeping through the oiled paper window, just enough to tell you the night has passed. You open your eyes not because you're rested, but because your body can't remain still any longer. Cold wakes you before hunger ever does. The stiffness in your joints forces movement, even if it's painfully slow. A winter day begins not with energy, but with endurance carrying on. You sit up. The straw blanket slips just slightly, and cold air immediately claims that space. You pull it back at once, a reflex learned quickly. There aren't many choices to make. The daily list of tasks is so short it doesn't need writing down. Check the fire. Stir it if there are embers left. If not, you accept a colder morning. Water left overnight is nearly frozen solid. You tap the side of the container. The dull, dry sound reminds you that winter is still here unmoved. Eating isn't a ritual, just a necessity. Food is simple, repetitive, and never enough to feel abundant. Then comes work, not to grow richer, not to move forward, but to keep things from getting worse. You go outside when you must. Chop wood if you have the strength. Gather the smaller pieces left behind. Every log you lift carries a quiet question. Will this be enough for tonight? A lack of firewood is winter's most constant worry. Never loud, never dramatic, but always present. You don't count days, you count nights. Each piece of wood is a fragment of the near future. When the sun reaches its highest point, it's still lower than you expect. The light is weak, cold, and offers no warmth. Afternoon comes early, bringing a fatigue that doesn't come from heavy labor, but from sustained tension. Your body never fully rests. Sleep arrives in short stretches, always broken by cold, by sound, by the need to stay aware. So exhaustion doesn't explode, it accumulates day after day. You learn to do everything more slowly, not out of leisure, but because speed means energy loss, and energy in winter is a form of currency. When darkness falls, there are no rituals to mark it. The light simply fades, and you begin preparing for the night, while the sun is still barely present. This is the most important moment of the day. Not eating, not working, but preparing to lie down. You arrange your limited space carefully. Firewood within reach. Objects placed so you won't have to search in the dark. Everything serves one goal, minimizing movement once the cold deepens. You don't hope for good sleep. You hope for a night that isn't too harsh. And then you lie down in the same position, on the same straw beneath the same blanket. Tomorrow will likely look exactly like today. That sameness is what makes wintertime feel different. It doesn't flow, it spreads out. There are no milestones to anticipate, no clear changes to mark progress, only repetition, like a long drawn-out breath of the earth itself. People no longer live by weeks or months, they live by chains of identical days. And within that sameness, the mind slowly releases big expectations. No distant dreams, no excessive thinking. Just a focus on keeping today from being worse than yesterday. That isn't pessimism, it's adaptation. Accumulated fatigue doesn't cause immediate collapse. It causes people to simplify the way they live. Fewer words, less movement, fewer reactions to what doesn't matter. Gradually that rhythm becomes normal. Very different from the modern world, but suited to a winter that doesn't end. Out here you don't live waiting for spring. You live to get through each winter day. And within that repeating rhythm, people begin to discover instinctive ways to protect what matters most. Not food, not belongings, but body heat. Because when every day looks the same, when fatigue becomes the background, the way you lie down, the way you place your body in the night, begins to matter deeply. And that's when sleep stops being about time and becomes about posture, instinct, and the way a human being holds themselves close to keep warmth through the long night. When the night has settled into its familiar rhythm, when fatigue has accumulated deeply enough, your body begins to speak, not in words, but in sensation. It reminds you that in this winter, everything complicated must be reduced. And sleep is no longer about time, but about position. You don't undress. You don't remove the layers that followed you through the long day. There is no true boundary between day and night beyond the fading light. Every layer of fabric you wear is part of a survival strategy. Wool, cotton, hide, not chosen for comfort, but for their ability to trap warmth in the smallest possible space. You lie down very slowly, not from hesitation, but because the body is calculating. Your back meets the cold straw, and instinctively you draw yourself inward, not from fear but from instinct. Knees pulled close, thighs together, spine gently curved. Your body makes itself smaller, like a creature that understands reducing exposure means conserving heat. Your arms do not fall loose. They press in close, one hand near your chest, the other holding fabric or resting against your own arm. Not for comfort, but to protect warmth in the most vital places, chest, belly, throat. Here there is no idea of a good-looking sleeping position, only an effective one. You learn to lie on your side, not fully curled, not fully flat, but at just the right angle, so the lungs can expand without wasting heat, so breath moves in slowly, out slowly, without carrying too much warmth away. As you exhale, you feel a faint warmth brush your wrist before fading. The body remembers this and adjusts breathing so the loss is minimal. You don't fall asleep immediately, not from worry, but because sleeping too deeply too soon can be dangerous. People of the Wild West rarely slept in one long stretch. They slept in thin layers, sleep-wake, then sleep again. Each waking moment barely enough to ask, "Am I still warm? Has anything changed?" Then the eyes close again. No dreaming, no thinking. Just a gentle slide back into the necessary half-state. This isn't sleep deprivation. It's adaptation. Here, sleep is not surrendering consciousness, but an ongoing negotiation between body and environment. You begin to sense layers of warmth forming around you, unseen, unheard, but undeniably present. A small, fragile bubble created by posture, by fabric, by the way you hold yourself. When you turn, that bubble breaks slightly. Cold slips in and the body reacts at once. You return to the old position slowly, very slowly, not from fear of cold, but from unwillingness to trade away the small amount of heat you've gathered. In nights like these, you start to understand that the human body is not as fragile as we think. It knows how to adapt if it's listened to. No instruction, no theory, just time and repetition. Survival sleep posture isn't taught from books. It's learned through experience, through nights long enough for the body to teach itself. Elders lie differently than the young. Children are placed in the center where warmth gathers most. Adults arrange themselves around them, forming a quiet circle of protection. No one speaks of it, but everyone knows. Here, sleep is never entirely individual. Even when you sleep alone, your posture still carries the imprint of community. Long nights teach people that the body doesn't need much, only the right way. And when posture settles, when breathing slows, when muscles release just enough tension without fully letting go, sleep finally arrives. Not deep, not complete, but enough to slow heat loss, enough to let the body recover slightly enough that tomorrow, when dim light returns, you can move and continue. In that quiet moment, curled within the long winter, you realize sleep was never just about closing your eyes. It belongs to the entire body, every joint, every vessel, every small reflex shaped by time. And once your body has found its place, once posture no longer requires thought, once everything has lowered to its quietest point, what remains in the night is no longer how you lie, but the faintest sounds surrounding you, sounds that continue to lull as sleep grows thinner and the night deepens just a little more. When your body has settled into its position, when each muscle has stopped resisting and your breath begins to flow more evenly, what remains in the night is no longer you. It rests in the sounds. At first you still hear yourself, the soft brush of fabric, as you shift the faint exhale disappearing into cold air. But those sounds slowly recede as if they understand it's time to make room. The first sound of the night is always the wind, not a violent gust, not a howl or a scream, just a steady movement, slow, persistent passing across the open land, slipping through wooden cracks, then moving on. The wind doesn't come to threaten, it comes to set the rhythm. Each time it passes, you hear a low whisper, like someone gently pulling a large cloth across the surface of the night. The sound repeats, not exactly the same, but familiar enough that your mind no longer questions it. After the wind comes the wood. Wood doesn't speak right away. It waits until the temperature inside the cabin shifts enough until the fibers contract just a little more. Then a faint crack, not a break, not a snap, just a small adjustment, as if the cabin is reminding itself how to last one more night. These sounds are uneven. They appear scattered near far without pattern, and because of that they don't startle you. They simply signal that everything is still where it should be. Outside, snow continues to slide, not crashing down, not sounding like rain, just small sections shifting slowly across the cabin roof, then dropping to the ground with a soft thump. Snow isn't in a hurry. It has the whole winter. The sound of snow is the sound of stretched time, no beginning, no end, only continuation. You don't see the snow, but you know it's there through subtle changes in how sound carries. As the snow thickens, the night grows quieter, as if the world has been wrapped in another heavy layer of cloth. And in that quiet, sometimes another sound appears, far, very far, a howl, not long, not close, just enough to remind you that you are not the only creature awake in this night, a wolf or a coyote. You don't distinguish, you don't need to. The sound doesn't carry panic. It's familiar. It belongs here. People who have lived long in the Wild West learn to hear wolves the way they hear the wind, not to fear, but to judge distance. The howl rises and fades. It doesn't repeat right away. It doesn't call again. The night returns to its steady rhythm, and it is this repetition that turns sound into a lullaby. There is no melody, no lyrics, only familiar elements arriving and leaving without demanding attention. Your mind, already tired from days of repetition, stops trying to analyze. It begins to drift with the sounds, like moving along a slow current. Wind, wood, snow, then wind again. Each sound marks that the night is continuing as it should. Nothing unusual, nothing requiring response. And within that steadiness, sleep grows thinner, lighter, and deeper in its own way. You don't sink, you settle. Hearing is no longer a vigilant gatekeeper. It becomes part of the background, a soft foundation holding you in this half-sleep. Here people don't need absolute silence to rest. In fact, complete silence can be unsettling. They need sound familiar, steady just enough. Because sound tells them they are still in the world, that the cabin is standing, that the night is unfolding according to its order. And when sound has become the underlying rhythm, when breathing and listening are no longer separate, when the body stops reacting to every small noise, what comes next in the night no longer arrives from outside. It comes from the presence of others, from breath, from faint movement, from no longer being alone in the dark. And that is when, amid the sounds of the long winter night's sleep, slowly carries another element with it, human warmth spreading gently, more quietly even than the wind. When the sounds of the night have settled into a familiar background rhythm, when wind and snow no longer demand your attention. What makes sleep feel steadier no longer comes from outside, it comes from other people. In the Wild West, sleeping together was not an emotional preference, it was a survival decision. You didn't sleep alone unless you had to, not out of fear, but because the human body understands something very clearly. Shared warmth is more stable than individual warmth. Inside small cabins, families lay close together, without clear boundaries, without separate beds. Children were placed in the center, not because of indulgence, but because that was where warmth gathered most. Smaller bodies lost heat faster, so they were surrounded by adults, wrapped in a quiet circle. You could feel someone's back against yours, an arm resting lightly, a foot brushing yours in the dark. No one asked permission, no one was bothered. Here, privacy was never the priority, survival was. Children's breathing was light and shallow, softer and quicker than adults, and that rhythm became a signal. If the child breathed evenly, the air was warm enough. The night was unfolding as it should. Adults listened without forming words, adjusting their position slightly, pulling a blanket closer, drawing inward just a bit to keep that breathing undisturbed. Sleeping together on nights like these wasn't romantic closeness. It was unspoken coordination. Elsewhere, mining camps, long bunkhouses, shared sleep took a different shape. You lay beside people who weren't family, not familiar, not bound by shared memory, but the night didn't care who you were. Men who worked all day in the cold lay down in rows, shoulder to shoulder, back to back. No one talked much, no one told long stories. Fatigue dissolved the need for conversation. What remained was breath. In those spaces you learned to recognize safety not through light, not through locked doors, but through the breathing of others. A steady, deep, slow breath beside you said the night is still okay. No looking, no confirmation needed. Breath was the night's common language. Sometimes someone shifted a small movement, then stillness returned. No complaints, no requests for distance. In the Wild West, loss of privacy was accepted from the beginning. It wasn't seen as deprivation. It was the cost of staying warm. People learned to shrink the self, to reduce personal space, in exchange for something larger stability. Sleeping together also created a kind of unconscious watch. When many bodies shared one space, no one slept deeply all at once. Someone was always half awake, half dreaming, not assigned, not instructed, just the collective's natural rhythm. If a strange sound appeared, one person stirred, another adjusted without waking anyone fully. The presence of many bodies made the night feel less alone, leaving fear with nowhere to settle. In the modern world we often sleep alone for privacy, for quiet, for control. But here people slept together to let go of control. Knowing you weren't the only one facing the night allowed the body to soften shoulders, lowering jaw, loosening breath, deepening, not because of perfect safety, but because relative safety was enough. Human warmth wasn't just temperature, it was a signal. It said you belonged here, even if only for a night, that you weren't facing the dark alone. And within that quiet bond, sleep grew deeper, not because it was quieter, but because it was supported. The elderly often lay at the edges, closer to the wall, closer to the draft. No one asked them to. They chose it themselves. Experience taught them that bodies accustomed to cold could endure it better, and that warmth should be reserved for those who needed it more. No explanations, no written rules, just the way a community arranged itself to move through winter together. And when the night had passed its halfway point, when many breaths blended into one slow rhythm, you understood that sleep in the Wild West was never a solitary act. It was a shared experience, a quiet exchange, a wordless agreement that everyone would help keep one another warm. But not everyone had that. When community was absent, when you lay down with only yourself and the vast darkness, sleep took on another form, thinner, more fragile, and demanding a very different kind of alertness. There are nights when no one lies beside you, no steady breathing near your ear, no faint movement of another body to remind you that you're not alone. There is only you, and an open space with no clear boundaries. This is the sleep of the solitary, not always by choice, sometimes because of work, sometimes circumstance, and sometimes simply because there is no one else. You sleep outdoors, no cabin, no wooden walls to block the wind. The sky opens above you, cold and deep. Your horse stands not far away. You hear it breathing slow, heavy, the vapour rising from its nostrils and dissolving into the dark. That horse is the only sign that you're still connected to another living being in this night. You set your saddle on the ground and use it as a pillow, not soft but familiar. A thin blanket spread out, a layer of hide if you're lucky. Not enough to stop the cold, only enough to slow it. You build a small fire, very small, not to warm yourself but to mark your place. Too large a fire draws attention, too small, and it means nothing. The fire of the solitary is always just enough to exist, never more. You lie down without fully closing your eyes. Sleep in this case doesn't arrive like a wave. It comes in fragments. You sleep, then wake, then sleep again. There is no clear line between dreaming and listening. Your ears remain open not from fear, but because it's the only way to survive. You hear the wind change direction, the dry grass whisper, the horse shift its weight. Each sound is checked quickly, not analyzed, just measured, normal or not. If it's normal, you close your eyes again. If it isn't, you wake fully. The body of someone sleeping alone never releases completely. A piece of awareness is always held back, like a hand resting on your shoulder. The small fire burns down. You don't add wood right away. Letting it fade is a way to quiet the night. The light weakens. Darkness moves closer. And it's in that moment you feel your own fragility most clearly, not because of the cold, not because of wild animals, but because there is no one to share this moment with. If you wake from the cold, only you know. If you dream of something, no one hears your quickened breath. The sleep of the solitary always carries a small question that never disappears. Will I wake up tomorrow morning? The question isn't loud. It doesn't panic you. It simply stays there, like a shadow. You don't answer it. You just remain still. In the Wild West, many cowboys grew used to this kind of sleep. They learned to accept that sleeping outdoors was not rest. It was standing watch while lying down. They didn't count hours of sleep. They counted the number of times they woke up and found that everything was still okay. The horse was still there. The fire still held embers. The The wind still moved steadily. That was enough. Sometimes you hear a distant sound, very distant, unclear. You don't sit up suddenly. You don't reach for a weapon. You simply open your eyes and listen for one more beat. If nothing follows you, let it pass. Those who live long outdoors don't react to everything. They choose. Their sleep is not deep, but it endures, not gentle but flexible. And on nights like these, when sleeping and waking weave together like breath, you begin to understand that humans can adapt to many things if they accept them long enough. Loneliness doesn't disappear, but it no longer overwhelms you. It becomes part of the night, like wind, like cold, like darkness. And then at some point, when the body has grown tired enough, when the ears detect nothing new, you slip into a thinner sleep. Longer, not because it's safe, but because there is no other choice. That sleep isn't beautiful. It isn't whole. But it keeps you alive. And it's from nights of solitude like these that people learn where their limits lie and how far survival instinct can stretch. But not everyone faces the night with only their bare body. There are people in harsher circumstances still for whom sleep is not just fragile, but nearly impossible. And that is when the story shifts to a very specific fate, a human being with a name, a night with no remaining choices except sleeping so as not to give up. After the long nights of the solitary, you begin to understand that there are people who do not just sleep alone but are left behind, not in fiction, not in legend, in real history. His name is Hugh Glass. You don't need the exact year. You don't need to know where he came from. On this night, those details no longer matter. What matters is that you do not encounter Hugh Glass as a mythic figure, but in a deeply human state, a wounded body left behind in winter with no one beside him. Hugh Glass is not introduced through achievements or reputation. He is introduced through silence as the last footsteps move away. You can picture that moment without many words: cold earth, dirty snow, heavy breathing, and then no more human sound. Hugh Glass's body is not one prepared for survival. It is a body that has been torn open in pain, weakened, no longer whole. Every movement carries a sharp, deep sensation you recognize without thinking. In that state, sleep is no longer a given. It becomes a small but very real question: do I dare close my eyes? You lie down on that first night, not with hope, but with exhaustion. There is no cabin, no steady fire, no horse standing nearby. Only the ground and a body that can no longer choose a comfortable position. Hugh Glass does not lie down like a healthy man. He collapses. His body cannot curl tightly enough. His arms cannot press to his chest the way instinct would prefer. Every small movement must be weighed against which pain can be endured. That night, sleep is not rest. Sleep is not dying from exhaustion. You cannot romanticize this moment. There is no cinematic light, no guiding music, just a man lying in winter breath, broken and cold, slowly pulling away what little heat remains. When Hugh Glass closes his eyes, it is not an act of courage nor of surrender. It is the body's temporary yielding. He does not dream of home. He does not dream of the future. His mind is too tired to form images. If sleep comes at all, it arrives in short, shallow moments, fragile and easily lost. Each time he wakes, the first question is not, "Where am I?" but "Am I still alive?" The question carries no panic, only a check. Hugh Glass has no community to lean on, no other breath beside him, no circle of warmth, only his own body and whatever it still remembers about staying alive. On that first night, you do not see a hero. You see a human being trying to keep his body from going out. Each exhale carries heat away. Each inhale may not bring enough back. Sleep here is no longer a strategy. It is a necessary risk. Without sleep, the body cannot continue. With deep sleep, it may not wake. Hugh Glass lies between those two possibilities. No choice, only endurance. History often speaks of Hugh Glass as a symbol of will. But on this night you do not need will. You only need to understand that history is sometimes shaped by extremely fragile sleep that is not beautiful, not sufficient, not whole, but just enough to keep life from leaving the body. Hugh Glass does not overcome that night. He remains within it. No victory, no defeat, only existence. And in that rough existence, history begins to change shape, no longer the shared story of the Wild West, but the story of one specific body with specific limits inside a night that cannot be shortened. Hugh Glass's first night alone is not a climax. It is the beginning of a chain of nights where every closing of the eyes carries the same old question. And when you stay long enough with that image, a human being with nothing left but a wounded body and surrounding darkness, you begin to understand that sleep in history is not always a place of recovery. Sometimes it is simply the place where a person does not give up. But to do that, Hugh Glass cannot rely on instinct alone. In the nights that follow, he is forced to find other ways to sleep, other layers of protection, other methods of survival that nature has suggested for a very long time. And from there, the story moves deeper into what human beings can use to shield their bodies from the cold when everything else has disappeared. After that first incomplete night, when the body is reduced to nothing but fragile survival, you no longer have many choices to consider. Every decision that follows is no longer made by willpower, but by whatever the body still remembers about staying warm. Animal hide enters this story not as a trophy, not as a symbol, but as a final layer of protection. Bear hide is heavy, thick, and unmistakably scented old blood-damp fur, the smell of a creature that once lived and has only just left its body. When you pull that hide over yourself, there is no comfort, no softness. Only one very specific thing happens: the wind slows down. Cold air no longer strikes your skin directly. It is held outside, delayed, bent, around coarse strands of fur. On nights like these, there is no fire, not because you don't want one, but because you cannot. Fire needs wood. Wood needs strength, and strength is something you no longer have to spare. More than that, fire is also an invitation, a signal too clear in the wide night. You choose darkness not from bravery, but because darkness is quieter. Without fire, everything slows. Space loses its clear edges. There is only the sensation of the animal hide pressing down on your body. Strangely, that weight brings a form of safety. It keeps you from moving too much. It reminds the body that every movement must be measured. Beneath the bare hide your body still hurts. Dried blood clings to the skin. Wounds throb dully. Every deep breath carries a small wave of pain. But that pain keeps you anchored to the present. You don't sink into sleep. You reach only its edge. Sleep in this case is a risky act. Sleep too deeply, and the body may forget to hold its heat. Sleep too lightly, and exhaustion will slowly grind you down. You remain in between, no choosing, no calculating, just staying in the position the body has found for itself. The hide holds back some warmth, not much, but enough to slow the cold. You feel your own heat being trapped, reflected back toward you with each breath. There are no loud sounds, no clear movements, only the faint brush of fur as the wind passes. In that darkness, time is no longer measured in hours. It is measured in awakenings. Each time you open your eyes, you see nothing, but you feel it. I am still here. Night follows night. There is no clear difference between them, no marker of progress. Each night is only another repetition of the same act, lying down, staying still, breathing slowly. Animal hide does not make you warm. It only keeps you from getting cold too fast. And in the world of survival, that is enough. There are moments when you want to move to ease the pain, but you don't. Movement costs heat, and heat is something you cannot replace. You learn to let pain exist without fighting it, without feeding it, letting it pass like wind moving through the night. Sleep arrives not as a descent, but as a fading. Thoughts thin out, sensation loosens. But each time consciousness drifts too far, the body pulls you back with a pulse of pain, a surge of cold, a tightening breath. This is not sleep failing. It is the body protecting itself. On nights like these, there are no grand hopes, no plans, only the repetition of the present. Bare hide is not a perfect solution. It is heavy, damp, unclean. But it is the one thing that connects you to the body heat of another creature that lived through this same winter. A rough continuation, not romantic but effective. And within that continuation, humans learn that survival does not always require invention. Sometimes it only requires borrowing what nature has already made. Night after night, you no longer know exactly how long you've slept. You only know that each time you open your eyes, the body still responds. Breath still goes out, still comes in, not smooth, not gentle, but present. Sleep inside animal hide is not healing sleep. It is sleep that does not let you die. And sometimes, in human history, that has been enough to change everything. Because once you've passed through nights without fire, nights of pain and deep cold, the body begins to search for another reason, to continue not to live long, but because it is not yet time to let go. And from that, not yet letting go, another kind of sleep slowly begins to emerge. A sleep not only to preserve body heat, but to keep fragile will from dissolving into the long night. After many cold nights strung together after the body has grown, used to pain, to hunger, to being awake more than asleep, you begin to notice something strange. It is not willpower that is keeping you here. It is the body. The body does not ask whether you still want to live. It does not wait for an answer. It quietly demands one simple thing: sleep. Not sleep to rest, not sleep to fully recover, just sleep so you don't collapse. At this edge, hope no longer plays an important role. You don't imagine tomorrow. You don't dream of rescue. You don't build futures in your mind. The mind is too tired for that. And right then, sleep appears not as a gift, but as a biological command. Your eyelids grow heavy, not because you feel safe, but because the body no longer has the energy to keep them open. This is not a heroic moment. There are no vows, no clear resolve, only a human being pushed to the limit while the body chooses to shut down what is unnecessary in order to preserve what remains. Sleeping in this moment is not surrender, but it is not a fight either. It is a forced pause. You lie down not believing sleep will make things better, but because if you don't, you will lose the ability to crawl forward at all. The body does not need your trust. It only needs you not to interfere. Breathing slows, uneven, ungraceful, but enough for blood to keep moving, enough for the heart to keep beating. In this state, sleep is shallow. It does not carry you far. It is like letting go of a rope for a few seconds, then grabbing it again. Each time you manage to sleep a little, the body rushes to do small things, mend a little, stabilize a little, hold onto a bit of heat. There is no miracle, no sudden recovery, only not worse than before. And in the history of survival, that has been enough. We often tell stories about people who overcame hardship through iron will. But the quieter truth is, this many did not survive by willpower at all. They survived because their bodies had not stopped yet. Sleeping so as not to give up is an ancient form of intelligence never taught, never named. It existed before language. When motivation is gone, when reasons to continue are no longer clear, sleep still arrives like a faint reminder, not yet time to stand, not yet time to do anything great, just not yet time to end. On nights like these, you do not tell yourself you will live. You simply do not die in the next few hours. And sometimes the difference between those two things is a thin sleep. Your body understands this better than your mind. It knows that if it keeps you awake too long, you will be completely drained. So it pulls you into sleep despite the cold, despite the pain, despite the fragility, not to heal you fully, but to keep you in the game. Sleep so you can crawl on. Not toward a grand goal, not toward victory, just a little farther through one more night, across one more boundary. Here, there is no romance, no pre-written lesson. There is only a simple rule. If you can still sleep, you still have the capacity to continue. Sleep becomes a rough compass. It doesn't point the way. It simply tells you the body is still working, and as long as the body is still working, the story is not over. You do not wake with new energy or fresh determination. You wake with only the ability to move again, a finger, an elbow, then the whole body. That is enough. In the modern world, we give sleep grand meanings, self-care, recovery, renewal. But in the harshest nights of human history, sleep held a far humbler role. It was simply the way life held on to itself so it would not fall. And, for that reason, it did not need to be beautiful or deep or complete. It only needed to happen just enough so that when dim light returned the next day, you could open your eyes without having to close them again immediately, not because of hope, but because it was not yet time to let go. And when the body has held you through many nights like this, when survival reflex has done its work, something else begins to appear quietly. Not strength, not willpower, but very old knowledge carried by people who lived with winter longer than anyone else. People who did not only sleep to survive, but learned how to sleep alongside nature itself. After the body has held you through the most fragile nights, after sleep has been just enough to keep you from giving up, you begin to realize that not everyone enters winter through chance and endurance. There were people who lived here long before wooden cabins ever appeared, long before winter was called brutal. For them, winter was not an enemy. It was part of life's rhythm. Indigenous people did not build homes to block the wind. They built shelters to guide it through. A teepee is not low, not sealed, not thick, but it understands wind. Fabric and hide are stretched into a cone so cold air does not linger but rises and escapes. Airflow is directed, not trapped as a threat, becoming an orderly current instead. At the center is fire, not large, not blazing, just enough to create a column of warmth that rises straight upward, carrying smoke and moisture with it. You don't need much wood. You only need the fire in the right place. Indigenous people did not sleep by instinct alone. Everything had a position. Ground layers were not for softness, but for insulation, dree grass, cattail fluff, thin hides stacked, not by comfort, but by their ability to trap still air. Still air is the best keeper of warmth. You did not lie at the center of the teepee, but offset according to wind direction, according to the fire. Children did not lie at the edges. Elders, not at the center. Not from emotion, but from understanding heat and airflow. Sleeping in that space was not about finding the best position for yourself. It was about becoming part of the layout. You lay down like a piece in a larger pattern. Your breath blended with the breath of the space. There was no sharp line between inside and outside. Indigenous people did not try to seal winter out. They let it pass through them, but in a way that did not take too much. Their sleep was not tense, not watchful. It was sleep prepared long before night arrived. Everything was decided in daylight. The direction of the shelter, the placement of the fire, the order of sleeping. When night came, the body did not need to make urgent survival choices. It simply followed what it already knew. They did not need deep sleep to survive, nor broken sleep to stay alert. They slept in rhythm with the land. If the wind strengthened, the shelter was adjusted. If the cold deepened, another layer was added. There was no sense of enduring, only continuous adaptation. Sleep did not fracture into pieces. It became steadier, more whole, not because winter was gentler, but because people had learned not to place themselves in opposition. Sleeping with nature was not surrender. It was a quiet form of cooperation. You did not ask winter to change, you changed how you existed within it. And when that practice continued long enough, winter stopped being a nightly trial and became a backdrop cold but familiar. Within that backdrop, sleep became part of a cycle like eating, moving, resting during the day. There was no sharp division between sleeping to live and living to sleep. Everything merged into one rhythm. Indigenous people did not speak much about sleep. They did not write about it or analyze it. They practiced it. And that practice formed a knowledge that endured without records carried forward through doing. When you see that difference, you do not find a moral lesson, only another way of living. one that places neither humans above nature nor nature above humans, but lets them move together in the same rhythm. In that rhythm, sleep no longer looks fragile. It looks like trust that space has been arranged correctly, that the body does not need to tense itself each night that winter, however long will pass in its own order. But not everyone in the Wild West carried that preparation, or inherited a refined knowledge of sleep shaped across generations. When others entered winter without that harmony, their sleep took on a different color. A color where sleep was not only survival but also a spiritual ritual, a way of listening to winter not just with the body but with dreams. When the cold is no longer something to fight, when the body has learned how to lie still within winter, another space begins to open. Not the space of tents or shelters, not the space of the body, but the inner space. There, people no longer ask, "How do I make it through the night?" but begin to whisper a different question, softer and slower. What is this night saying? Winter in slow-living communities is not a time for constant action. It is a time to listen. And to listen, people create very small rituals. Nothing loud, nothing elaborate, just enough to mark that night has arrived and the mind can lower itself. A lullaby not for entertainment, not for performance, but a simple melody repeated again and again, sung so softly it nearly merges with breath. The words do not need to be clear. Sometimes they are only stretched syllables, a steady rhythm enough for a child's body to slow enough for adults to release the tightness held in their shoulders. Winter lullabies are not meant to chase away the cold. They help reorder the mind. When sound becomes familiar, when rhythm no longer demands attention, sleep arrives not as a drop but as a mist. The direction of sleep itself becomes a ritual, not superstition, not complex ceremony, just habits kept across generations. People lie according to wind, according to fire, according to the familiar shape of the ground. Not because a direction is sacred, but because it has worked before. When the body believes it is lying in the right place, the mind no longer needs to stay alert. Nearby warmed stones are set out, not hot, just gently warm, holding the day's heat and releasing it slowly through the night. The stones do not warm the space, they warm presence. One near the back, one near the feet, not many, just enough to keep the body from tightening further. And like everything else in winter, the stones do not hurry. They work slowly, quietly, without demand. Within that space, dreams begin to appear, not vivid, not dramatic. Winter dreams are often short, fragmented, filled with familiar images, fire, earth, wind, animals seen during the day. Dreams do not take people far away. They keep them here. Dreams are not analyzed upon waking, not rushed into explanation. They are shared slowly, if shared at all, and sometimes simply held inside. Winter does not encourage too much understanding. It encourages just enough feeling. Elders listen to the dreams of children not to judge, but to sense where the mind is resting. There are no right or wrong dreams, only dreams that reflect the current rhythm of life. If dreams are calm, the night has been calm. If dreams are restless, the next day is adjusted, another layer added, less work done. Not to control dreams, but to care for the ground from which dreams grow. In the long winter, ritual is not separate from life. It is an extension of daily living, eating more slowly, speaking less, sleeping in the right place, breathing more evenly. All of it forms a rhythm low enough that the mind is not pulled tight. Winter, seen this way, is not a time to create new things, but a time to listen to what already exists: the body, the space, the dream. No need to understand everything, only not to turn away. And as the night deepens, as ritual finishes its quiet work, as dreams begin to flow more evenly, sleep becomes a continuous current, not deep in the modern sense, but stable. In that state, people no longer ask how long they will live. They simply remain within this moment. And that remaining creates a different kind of safety. Not safety through total protection, but safety through alignment with winter's rhythm. But when others, those who did not grow up within this knowledge, enter winter with minds that have not yet settled, their sleep takes on another shape. Fewer rituals, less support, and more empty spaces within the night. And it is within those spaces that unnamed things begin to appear, the strange phenomena of winter sleep, the stories without clear answers, where people sleep and yet are not entirely sure which boundary they are crossing. When winter stretches on long enough, when ritual has become habit, when dreams no longer stir unease, people begin to realize that not all sleep is the same. There are nights when sleep arrives very slowly, and there are nights when it comes in a way that leaves you unsure whether you have entered it at all. In the memory of many communities that endured brutal winters, people speak quietly of such nights, without clear names, without final explanations. They only know that these are nights when sleep becomes unusual. Some call them edge of sleep nights. Others simply avoid mentioning them, not out of fear, but because there is no need to understand everything. On those nights, people sleep for a very long time, or seem to. When they wake, the body feels heavy, the mind dim, time unclear. No one is certain they dreamed. No one is certain they slept deeply. They only know that when their eyes open, everything around them looks as if it has passed through a thick mist. Elders in the community do not rush to question. They observe. If the person is still breathing evenly, can still eat a little, can still move slowly, then that sleep is considered to have done its job. No further questions are needed. Certain objects are used not for a clear function, but for the sense of reassurance they bring. Stones wrapped in soft cloth silk or thin hide. The stones are no longer hot, only faintly warm. They are placed near the sleeper not to heat but to create an anchor, something with weight, with warmth, something that says the body is still here. No one claims the stones have special power. No one insists on explanations. They only know that with the stone present, sleep is less likely to drift too far away. In other places, people sleep in thick straw, not only for softness, not only for insulation. Straw creates a strange feeling of being held without restraint. Those who sleep in straw move very little. They sink slowly and they wake slowly. Straw says nothing, but it retains the scent of the previous day earth smoke labor. Those familiar smells keep the mind closer to reality even when sleep grows deep and long. Some communities dig sleeping hollows, not large, not deep, just enough for a body to curl inside. The hollow holds warmth, but more importantly, it holds the feeling of being surrounded. In that earthen space, sound is muted, wind does not pass directly through, and stillness deepens. People who sleep there dream less or do not remember dreaming. Sleep becomes dense but not heavy. No one claims this is the best way. No one tells others to follow it. These practices are passed along only as soft notes in the margins of daily life. What matters in all these stories is not the detail, but the human attitude toward what is not understood. There is no rush to label, no rush to explain, no attempt to turn sleep into something that must be controlled. If someone sleeps too long, others simply make sure they are not getting colder, that they are left in peace. If someone sleeps fitfully, others lower noise, dim light, and do not wake them unless necessary. There is no concept of a correct sleep-only sleep that fits the circumstances. Winter, in these views, is a time when the boundary between waking and sleeping softens. People do not force themselves to stand fully on one side. They drift slowly in between. The mysteries of sleep are not kept to inspire fear. They are kept to remind us that humans do not need to understand everything in order to live with it. Sleep does not always need clarity. Sometimes it only needs respect, and that respect creates a deeper sense of safety than any explanation ever could. As you hear these stories, you are not asked to believe anything. You are simply invited to stay with the uncertainty for a moment, without analysis, without conclusions, just to notice that throughout human history there have been many nights when sleep did not follow a pattern, and people still lived on, still woke up, still made it through winter. These mysteries do not need to be fully opened. They only need to be set gently in a corner of collective memory as a quiet reminder that not everything important must be named. And when sleep has moved through that blurred space long enough, when people have grown accustomed to not needing full understanding, something else slowly appears, not mystery, not ritual, but a collective form of sleep, where safety does not come from objects or arrangements, but from the shared rhythm of many human breaths at once. After nights when sleep has grown uncertain, after long stretches where the boundary between waking and dreaming becomes unclear, people gradually return to a very old instinct. Not the instinct to fight, not the instinct to flee, but the instinct to stay together. In the long winters of the Wild West, people rarely slept alone if they had any other choice. They sought out places where other bodies were present. Bunkhouses, shared sleeping quarters for miners, cowboys, and hired hands, were not built for comfort. They were built to hold people. The spaces were tight, ceilings low, beds pushed close together. There was no distance wide enough to be called private, but in exchange there was something essential. You were not alone in the night. When you lie down in a bunkhouse, you do not need to look around to know whether you are safe. You only need to listen. The sound of other people breathing, not even but real, someone turning over, someone coughing softly, someone letting out a quiet sigh. These sounds do not wake you, they reassure you. The human body has known this for a very long time, long before solid houses ever existed. Sleeping together is not a rational decision. It is a survival reflex. In a shared space, no one sleeps completely deeply, but no one stays fully awake either. Sleep is divided, distributed, rotated. One person drifts closer to waking while another sinks deeper. No one plans this. No one assigns roles. It happens unconsciously, like waves rising and falling within the same body of water. If an unfamiliar sound appears, there is no need for everyone to wake. One person shifts. One breath changes rhythm. One small movement. That is enough for the entire space to register it. Communal sleep does not eliminate danger. It simply dilutes it. Each person carries a very small portion of vigilance, and because of that, no one has to carry it all. In a bunkhouse, you do not sleep according to your own rhythm. You sleep according to a shared rhythm. Your breathing slows because everything around you is slowing. Your body adjusts to the space, to the sounds, to the presence of others. There is no bright light, no large fire, only warmth accumulating from many bodies lying close together. That warmth does not come from a single source. It comes from accumulation. Each person contributes a little, and everyone benefits. In that space, privacy is no longer a priority. No one expects it. You do not maintain distance. You do not guard boundaries. Clothes hang together. Belongings overlap. Everything is temporary. But that very impermanence creates a strange sensation. You do not have to fully protect yourself. There are nights when you cannot remember when you fell asleep. You only know that when you open your eyes, someone is still beside you, not family, not close friends, just other people also trying to make it through this winter. And that is enough. Communal sleep does not require emotional intimacy. It requires physical presence. At the deepest level, humans do not sleep well when they believe they are the only living being in the darkness. When other bodies are nearby, the nervous system slows. Not because you trust each individual, but because you trust the group. The group becomes an invisible fence, not sealed, not absolutely secure, but enough to create the feeling that you are not facing the night alone. In a bunkhouse, no one tells long stories. No one shares deeply. Communication is reduced to the minimum. A nod, a brief greeting. Then everyone lies down. Nothing more is needed. Sleep does not ask for explanations. And when night passes, when pale grey light filters in through cracks in the door, people wake up, not all at once. One sits up earlier, another later. No one wakes anyone else. There is no need. The waking rhythm, like the sleeping rhythm, self-adjusts. People step out of the bunkhouse not feeling fully rested, but with the sense that they have made it through another night. In the history of survival, that matters far more than sleeping well. Communal sleep is not an ideal solution, but it is a durable one. It is not optimal for the individual. It is optimal for the survival of the group, and for that reason, humans have maintained it for centuries in many places under many harsh conditions. When you look at communal sleep, you do not see noble sacrifice. You see a very simple truth. Humans live better when they do not try to survive alone. Sleep, in this case, is not a retreat from the world. It is remaining within it together with others. And when the night has grown long enough, when the group has moved through many such cycles of sleeping and waking, something else begins to appear. No longer mutual protection, no longer unconscious vigilance, but dreams that begin to resemble one another, stories shared in the morning, images repeating across multiple minds, as if when people sleep together long enough, they do not only share warmth, but begin to share their dreams as well. When people have slept beside one another long enough, when their breathing has settled into a shared rhythm, when the night no longer feels like a threat that demands constant vigilance, something subtle begins to happen. Dreams no longer belong entirely to one person alone. Not in a mystical way, not through miracles, simply through familiar images repeating across different minds. Fire appears in many dreams, not blazing, just steady, snow-covered paths, slow-moving rivers. Animals seen during the day. No one is surprised when another person describes a dream filled with images that feel uncannily similar to their own. They do not say, "We dreamed the same dream." They simply nod quietly, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. On winter mornings, when the light is still weak and the body has not fully woken, dreams are shared, not for analysis, but to ease the mind. No one searches for deep meanings. One person mentions a long road, another recalls a grey sky. Someone remembers the sound of wind. Someone else remembers the smell of smoke. These fragments placed side by side form a picture complete enough to soften the sense of isolation. Shared dreams are not tools of prophecy. They do not guide or warn. They do one simple thing. They remind you that your mind is not wandering alone. In a long winter, the danger is not only the cold, but repetition, days like days, nights like nights. If the mind has nowhere to loosen its grip, it can turn inward on itself. Dreams become a gentle form of mental relief, not stimulating, not dramatic, just a slow drift that allows the brain to relax its hold on survival. When dreams are shared, they lose their individual weight. A fear becomes lighter when you hear it echoed in someone else's dream. A recurring image becomes less troubling when you know you were not the only one who saw it. Shared dreaming is not spiritual merging. It is collective psychological regulation. People dream of the same world because by day they live in the same world, under the same sky, the same weather, the same rhythms. The mind simply continues this work at night. Dreams are told and then allowed to pass like smoke, thinning like breath, disappearing into cold air. This lack of grasping keeps dreams from becoming a burden. Dream, then wake, then live on. In communities that sleep together, people understand that not every dream needs meaning. Some dreams only need to happen so the mind does not harden. Dreaming so as not to break is not a dramatic phrase. It is a quiet truth. When winter stretches too long, when days grow too short, when little changes from one day to the next, dreams become small windows through which the mind can breathe. And when those windows open at the same time in many people, connection requires no words, no intimacy, no deep understanding, only the knowledge that in the night other minds have walked paths very similar to yours. Shared dreams do not make people stronger. They make them more durable, durable enough not to fracture under repetition, durable enough not to fold inward too tightly. And as you listen to these dreams told in slow voices without climax or conclusion, your own mind begins to drift as well. There is nothing to remember, nothing to sort. Just staying with the rhythm long enough to realize that sleep is not always shutting down. Sometimes sleep is being together in a softer world. And when dreams have finished their work, when the spirit has loosened enough, people move into the final layers of winter, where there is little left to say, little left to dream, only a long quiet and another kind of sleep, one that does not need sharing, does not need retelling, only permission to happen gently, slowly enough to carry both body and mind into deeper rest. Not everyone enters winter carrying scarcity. Some step into the cold nights with soft beds, thick walls, closed doors, and gentle lamplight. They do not sleep on straw. They do not lie beside strangers. They do not need to share warmth or listen to another person's breathing. They sleep alone. The bed is wide enough for the body to stretch out fully. The mattress is soft. The blankets are heavy. The sheets are clean. There is no pain forcing them to change position. No sudden noise pulling them awake in the night. A hotel in a small town. A private house at the edge of the street. A room designed to separate them from the outside world. Everything seems to say you are safe here, and most of the time that is true. The wealthy do not need other bodies to preserve heat. They do not rely on unconscious vigilance. They do not divide their sleep into fragments. They have the means to sleep long and uninterrupted. But when the night grows deep, when everything settles, when the light dims, something subtle happens. The quiet becomes too clear. There is no steady breathing beside them, no small movement to confirm life nearby. There is only the self and a wide space enclosed by 4 walls. In that space, very small sounds begin to emerge. Wind passing through a narrow crack, wood expanding in the cold, a faint sound from far away, not dangerous, not alarming, but enough to remind them that beyond these walls winter still exists. The wealthy do not fear the cold in a physical sense. They have what they need to resist it, but they still hear the wind. And when they hear it, they know something very clearly. Everything they possess is only a layer of separation, a good one, but not a permanent one. In those warm rooms, sleep is not interrupted by survival, but by awareness. Awareness that if the door were opened, if the fire went out, if supplies were cut off, things could change very quickly. They do not articulate this. They do not form the thought in words, but their bodies know, and so their sleep, though comfortable, never fully lets go. A portion of awareness remains not because it must, but because it is human habit. No matter the social class, people carry a deep memory of fragility. A soft bed does not erase that memory. It only quiets it. In the night, when the wind grows slightly stronger, when a window trembles, the one sleeping on the soft bed still turns over. Not because of cold, but because the body still responds to the world. The wealthy do not sleep poorly. They simply sleep not deeply, in a different way. Not from lack of safety, but from knowing that safety is conditional. They do not need community to stay warm, yet they never fully forget that community was once the only thing that kept people alive. Throughout history, the sleep of the wealthy has never been entirely separate from the sleep of others. They may have private rooms, but never completely private sleep. Winter does not discriminate. The wind does not ask who is rich or poor. The long night does not care about comfort. When the wealthy listen to the wind, they do not panic. They simply listen. And in that moment, they resemble everyone else more than they do during the day. Roles fall away. Status dissolves. There is only a body lying still in the night, aware that it is protected and that this protection could be lost. The sleep of the wealthy is not selfish. It is simply sleep built on distance, distance from the ground, from the wind, from other bodies. That distance brings comfort, but it also carries a quiet form of loneliness, not painful, not obvious, just the sense of sleeping in a space without a shared rhythm. And so, even after a full night's rest, the wealthy do not entirely forget that human sleep from the very beginning was never meant to be solitary. As dawn approaches, as the wind softens and pale grey light appears, they wake with a familiar feeling they have passed through the night safely, not because they conquered winter, but because winter allowed it. That feeling is not so different from the feeling of others in other places, under other conditions. Only the path to it differs. And from that quiet difference the picture of winter sleep slowly closes, not with a grand conclusion, not with judgment or comparison, but with a simple truth wherever they are, whether on straw, in a bunkhouse, or on a soft bed people enter. Sleep carrying the same thing within them, their own fragility. Once that is understood, nothing more needs to be said. The night can continue to move on, the breath can slow, and this story can reach its final place where sleep is no longer divided or compared, but remains simply a deeply human act, sleeping in order to go on living one more day. After everything you have moved through in this long night, after the many ways of sleeping, the many spaces, the many lives, what may remain is not a specific image, but a very gentle feeling. The feeling that human sleep was never meant to be perfect. It does not need to be soft. It does not need to be deep. It does not need to be unbroken. For most of human history, sleep had only one modest task to keep people going. Sleep was not always beautiful, not always calm, not always comfortable. There were nights spent on damp straw, nights curled up in the wind, nights of broken sleep waking more than resting. And there were nights when sleep arrived only in brief moments, then slipped away. But that was enough. Enough to keep the body from collapsing, enough to keep the mind from breaking, enough so that the next day's light would still have someone to meet it. Our ancestors did not ask sleep to heal everything. They did not expect to wake as improved versions of themselves. They hoped for one thing only: to wake up. And that simplicity is what made sleep such a durable part of life. Sleeping to continue is not a lofty philosophy. It is a very quiet truth. Sleeping to get through the night. Sleeping so the body can move again. Sleeping so that morning does not begin in total exhaustion. There is no need to be strong, no need to be optimistic, only the need to not be finished yet. Across history, many people survived not because they had long-term plans, but because they slept just enough to keep from giving up at their worst moment. That sleep was not a victory. It was a small pause between efforts, a longer breath, a slower heartbeat, one night passing. And then a new day begins. Not a better day, just a different one. For people in the past, that was enough. When you look back on this entire journey from cold and darkness, from cramped and open sleeping places, from community and solitude, you may notice something gentle. People never slept to escape life. They slept so they could return to it. They slept to keep working, to keep caring for others, to keep enduring, to keep loving in simple, ordinary ways. Sleep was never asked to deliver great meaning. It did not need to teach or enlighten. It only needed to do its job. And once finished, it quietly withdrew, just like the night. The night does not explain. It does not judge. It does not ask questions. It arrives, stays for a while, then yields to the light. Sleep is the same. It makes no promises. It offers no guarantees. It only whispers rest, just a little. And if you listen, if you do not resist it, if you allow yourself not to sleep perfectly, not to sleep correctly, not to sleep as deeply as you think you should, then sleep may arrive in the gentlest way. It can. Not rushing, not suddenly, just thoughts thinning, breath slowing, the body growing heavy. Not heavy with exhaustion, but heavy because it has been set down. In that moment you do not need to remember settlers or cowboys or old communities. You do not need to remember history. History has already done its work. It has brought you here to this moment where sleep no longer needs to be told as a story. It is simply a very human act unfolding. Sleep, not beautiful, not perfect, but enough that you do not need to do anything more. Enough for the night to keep moving. Enough for tomorrow, whatever tomorrow may be, to begin. And so you do not need to try any more. You can let your eyes grow a little heavier. Let the breath move out, then in, more slowly. No need to hold a rhythm. No need to count. Just allow. The night is here. Sleep is here too. And like countless generations before you, there is only one last thing to do at the end of the day: sleep to continue. From the entire slow journey you have just taken through the story, how did people sleep during brutal winters in the Wild West? Relaxing history for sleep. One message lingers for a long time, even though it is never stated outright. Human beings do not survive through perfection, but through what is just enough. The people of the Wild West did not sleep to achieve ideal recovery. They did not wait for deep, soft, uninterrupted rest. Most of the time they slept lightly, briefly, in the cold, in pain, in quiet anxiety. But they still slept, and that alone helped them not give up. Their sleep was not a reward. It was a modest act of survival, just enough to stand up the next morning, to move again, and to live one more day. That lesson feels strikingly close to our modern lives. When we are tired, we often blame ourselves for not resting well enough, not sleeping properly, not fully recovering. But history reminds us that rest does not need to be perfect to matter. An incomplete night of sleep, a short pause, an uneasy night, can still be exactly what allows us to continue. This story also reminds us of the quiet strength of community. People sleep better when they are not alone, whether in the bunkhouses of the past or in the quiet presence of loved ones around us today. And above all, our ancestors leave us with a gentle truth: adapt rather than resist. Accept a slower rhythm. Allow yourself to be weak at times so that you can endure longer. Thank you for staying until the end of this journey. If this story brought you a moment of calm before sleep, please like, share and subscribe so we can continue these slow, warm, deeply human history stories together. Wishing you a peaceful night and a sleep that is just enough to continue.